Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're talking about camshafts, also known as bump sticks. So I've always wanted to put cams in my car, and we're about to do it. And I've actually got basically three choices. So here's the factory Mazda camshaft. These are all the VVT intake cams. So factory camshaft, this is a regrind from Fab 9, and then this is from Cat Cams. We're going to go over all three of these. I've actually got specs. We took some measurements earlier. We haven't done like duration yet. That's actually kind of hard to measure, but we probably are going to do that. We'll see. Even though I have the specs from the cams, I kind of want to measure it and see for myself. But let me show you guys a couple things. So first things first, the Fab 9, the way this works, you just take your existing camshaft, and you mail it to them, and then they regrind the cam and then send it back. So this is the cam that came out of my head. This is a cam that came out of a different Miata VVT head. I have a spare, so I pulled the cam out of it, and this cam looked perfect. It had super low mileage. It was in excellent condition, and they advertised a 2 to 3 day turnaround, and it only took about 4 months, so it's kind of normal for Fab 9, I think. But anyway, as bad as that sounds, Cat Cams was way worse. So I had to go through a dealer. I couldn't buy directly from Cat Cams. And these took I'm not joking, over a year to get these. And when I finally got them, I put them on the shelf, and I was like, oh, finally. And then I get an email saying, hey, you check your cams, and I check them, and basically they had machined the cam piece on the back wrong. And then I had to mail them again and wait a few more months, and I finally get them back. And I'm just now noticing they didn't actually fix the cam. Like before, this was machined into the cam, I believe. Looks like what they did was they machined it off and just built an adapter and stuck it on there. I'm not really a fan of that. Let's go over that in a minute, but it's kind of a crappy implementation. If I do use it, I'm either going to remake it or tack weld it on there. We'll come back to that. So, what's the good and the bad? So the factory Mazda camshafts, I looked it up, are advertised to have 0.35 inches of lift. That's what I saw on the interweb. Now, what you're going to notice, I've got three measurements: the base circle, the max diameter, and then I calculate the max lift. So for those of you that haven't done camshafts before, the base circle, so you can obviously see there's a lobe poking up, right? If I was to get down here and just measure this part, you'll get a smaller number because the lobe's not poking up. This is called the base circle. Essentially, it's the circle that kind of runs underneath this before the cam lobe pokes out. So that has a diameter, and that's where your valve clearance goes. This circle is almost touching your lifters, and you have a small clearance, and that's how you set your valve. That's how you measure valve clearance. It's between the base circle and the lifter. So I measured the base circle on the lobes. I did all of them. I did the first 4 to kind of get a range. I didn't measure all 8. But anyway, I kind of just wanted to see if they varied any or whatever. And they do, so we'll get to that. So interestingly, let's come back over here. So you'll notice the base circle on a factory camshaft, I'm showing 1.417 to 1.42. So this moves around a little bit. That's the factory camshaft. So 7 to 20, that's 3 thou. Now the Fab 9 one is just a regrind of the factory cam, so you can't really expect it to be any better. And it's basically the same, maybe 1 thou over, but basically the same. Now the Cat Cams, that only moved 1 thou, and I actually measured 3 of them, showed this, and the 4th one, it was closer to 20 than it was 19, but it wasn't quite all the way there. So this one, they control their base circles a lot tighter than the factory cams, or the regrinds for that matter. Now let's look at the diameter. So this is measuring the lift. So I measured those. You can see that this factory ones went from 86 to 89. So 3 thou difference. And curiously, for whatever reason, I checked this on all 4 of these. So this one would be the 89, 86, 89, 86. And this pattern repeated. It almost seems like it was intentional. I don't know why. Maybe they're doing something where, you know, maybe one valve just barely opened before the other, and that does something magical or something. I don't know. Maybe that was designed, but it did repeat. I did notice that. I checked it multiple times because I saw the variance, and I was like, man, I'd measure this, and I'd go to the next one and measure this, and then it would go to here, and I'm like, am I measuring it wrong? It's like, no. It's doing that for whatever reason. So when I come over here to the Fab 9, we're seeing that same kind of variation. So here it went from 6 to 9 is 3. It went from 1 to 5 is 4. A little bit more variation than factory. Now the Cat Cams were dead on. Every single one measured exactly the same. Again, consistency and quality control are going to cat cams so far. Then we get to the max lift, and this is where things get surprising and interesting. So here's the factory lift. Now the way I calculated this is I took the worst case for the base circle, which is when it's the smallest, and then I take, maybe I think I'm saying these numbers right, the least amount of lift and the smallest base circle, or the biggest base circle, whatever. Sorry, I'm screwing this up on camera. But I basically did the worst case, and the worst case gives you 366 to 372 lift. Let's see what that is in metric. Okay, so I just converted, and we're looking at basically 9.3 to 9.45 millimeters of lift. So a little over 9 millimeters, maybe 9.5, depending on how you look at it. Now, if we come over here, but I'm fine with inches. I like inches anyway. Now, when we go to Fab 9, this is really surprising that a performance camshaft has less lift than the stock one. Not gonna lie, that doesn't even sound right, but okay, I don't know. I'm kind of questioning this, but, and this is frustrating. This is one of the things about Fab 9, like, I have very mixed feelings about this company, Fab 9. I'll keep this rant short, but basically, they have a lot of parts, a great website, easy to order from. There's a lot of stuff I like about that. Their customer service, if you can actually talk to them, they're pretty good, but it's good luck getting a hold of them. I've had some, I think I've probably had 2 good experiences where I was able to quickly get a hold of them. Several times where, oh God, 20-something emails to get an issue resolved. Crazy stuff. So I never did get the specs. I actually requested the lift and duration. I wanted the cam specs before I purchased, and I could never get them. And I ended up buying them anyway because I just needed them. But I really wanted the specs, and maybe this is why they'd never give them to me. Because if they would, I'd have said, hey, how come that's worse than the stock specs? But for whatever reason, it is. And I measured, and they vary. So you can see we got 8 thou of variation in the max lift when you compare the base circle and the max diameter. Whereas over here, we got, what's this, 6 thou variance from the factory, 8 thou from Fab 9. So, I mean, yeah, it's a regrind, but that is quite a bit of variance. We come over to Cat Cam, 1 thou. So, again, a lot more consistent. But you're going to notice something. These numbers are bigger, which is pretty common when you buy high-performance camshafts for your vehicle. You kind of expect to have more lift and more duration. Well, these cams damn sure have more duration, though I haven't measured it. And they also have more lift. I have measured that. So going from basically an average of, say, 369 to basically 389, that's about 30 thou more lift, right? 30 thou, 3/4 of a millimeter. That would basically be saying, yeah, they're advertised at about 10 millimeters of lift is, I think, what they say. Yeah, and that's basically 10 millimeters, I think. Let's check. Oops, times that by 25.4, survey says 9.88. Yeah, so that's basically 10 millimeters. I think they're advertised at like 9.9 or 9.95, so that's pretty much in spec. This is kind of surprising. If I have to pick between these cams, I go from basically 388 to, pick the middle of this, 346. 46 to 88, that's a solid millimeter. It's actually a little over, I believe. That's a full millimeter loss of lift. So if these are 9.88, I'd be looking at 8.88. So that kind of sucks for a performance cam. Now granted, it's got a lot more duration. That's kind of obvious. We'll look at that in a second. So I'm sure these make more power, but that is kind of disappointing that you're actually losing lift running these cams. Losing it compared to these cams, but even losing it compared to stock. So kind of just based on that alone, I don't want to run these. We'll see, but I don't think so. So let's go over some more details. That's kind of the specs. Let's talk about quality. So you can only expect so much from a regrind camshaft because it's still limited by the factory. So these are cast iron cores from the factory. If I zoom in, you can see the rough castings. Now if we come over here to this one, this is an aftermarket camshaft. It's actually made out of a billet, which is awesome. Those are usually stronger and higher quality, and that's what it looks like. Although I see one thing that's a little worse on these, but for the most part I think they're better. So if you look at these, you'll see these oil holes are really big compared to the aftermarket. That seems like a downside. I'm not sure how much it really matters. It probably doesn't matter, but just a note. And then these bearings, these bearings are bigger, not that that matters, but the lobes are a lot skinnier. I haven't put a number to that. We should probably check that real quick. So let's see if we can do this on camera. Factory lobes, about 650. This lobe, about 560 roughly, approximately. So we're losing about 90 thou of lobe width. And it almost looks like it's more because they bevel this, which is actually a good thing. But yeah, the lobes are definitely skinnier. Now that doesn't affect performance, but it does affect reliability. So, but there's another thing they did that's probably going to help reliability. So if you'll note, these cams look black and silver. This black is some type of oxide coating, so like nitriding or black oxide or something. They did a little something on these camshafts, it looks like, maybe, but not nearly the same. It almost looks pickled or something, whereas this has like an actual oxide. And that is slippery. Like if I run my finger over this, I can feel this. If I do it on this one, it does feel a little bit slicker. So that's probably good for friction and wear resistance, although I don't like that being more narrow. Also, when you're doing your cams, this hex is all machined instead of cast, so that's kind of a nice little plus. Okay, so let's see. One thing we should talk about is this little trigger. So on the factory one, these are pressed into the camshaft. So if Mazda did it, I guess I can't fault them for doing it either. But I don't like how they implemented it. They put this key here that has nothing on it. Then they have a groove cut that's also got nothing. And to top it all off, it even has a set screw. So I haven't checked that set screw to know if they Loctited it. I'm not sure how good of a press fit this is, or if it just slips on and then the screw holds it. I don't know if there's an indentation that screw hits, but I really don't like that. It looks like they just like water jet or laser cut this little disc. And one of my biggest objections is having this groove right here, because that could basically show up as like a tooth in the other direction. It's kind of, you really don't like that. You don't really want to see that. It'll maybe work or probably work, but I don't like that. Another thing I'm noticing, see how the teeth stick out away from this base circle a lot? That gives it a really clean signal, getting the tooth far away from here, and you can note they're much shorter, you know, compared to the other one. So again, not ideal. And then of course this screw looks like a negative tooth as well, because from the sensor's perspective, that's a dip. So I really don't like this trigger wheel. So basically, I don't think any of these are a perfect camshaft, but they are camshafts. Don't know how much this matters, but I'm going to show you the last little thing I noticed, like a difference between them. So the pin on these two is the same, although I did just notice that my pin was bent. Not sure how that happened, but at least I'm swapping it anyway. But that pin needs to be changed. This pin's longer. I don't know if that matters. I'll check. It probably doesn't. I'm assuming if they did that, it works, but something to note. So anyway, that's kind of a comparison. Now I've got the exhaust cams. I just haven't taken them out of the box and done a comparison on those. Maybe I should after looking at this. But yeah, that's kind of a summary of these. So basically, if you guys are looking for camshafts, I probably wouldn't go with the Fab 9. They are cheaper, and I did get them a lot quicker than these. But I don't know. The only thing they've really got going for them is you get a lot more duration. These are actually advertised to be the same duration. They're both 272s. So this will probably be a future video if we do it. But what would be nice is actually put this on a cylinder head. And I've done this a long time ago, but basically put it in a cylinder head and put a dial indicator on the lifter and a degrees on the cam wheel, and you basically spin the cam and directly measure the valve lift at each point. And then you can graph it out and say, hey, here's my duration at 50, my duration at 40, or whatever. It gives you a really clear picture of how the cam performs. I'll try to get this on video. Maybe this will show up. See how that lobe kind of points up? And the very top of it looks like it's kind of narrow. Let's compare that to the Fab 9 cam. If that shows up, it's a lot fatter, which is kind of the point. It's got more duration. So the lobe's not quite as tall, but it's a fatter, wider lobe on it. And then here's the cat cams for reference. These are taller. Physically, the lobe pokes up more, and it's also got a fatter lobe on it as well. Again, Let me put these two next to each other. Maybe this will kind of show up decent on camera. That's the the cat cams and the factory cams side by side. You can kind of see how that one on the right, it's just got a big wide lobe compared to the factory one's pretty narrow. And let's see if we can squeak the Fab 9 one in here for reference. There we go, maybe get all three in the same picture. So that's kind of what we're talking about. Anyway, I think that's enough for this video. Hope y'all found this interesting, and until next time, y'all take it easy.